back with us Mr. Ying. He's a secondary school teacher at Geylang Methodist Secondary and is on the school executive committee. And he's heading up the department that promotes character and citizenship education. He and his wife worship at Emmaus Evangelical Free Church. And today, Mr. Chin will be speaking on the topic of meekness from Numbers 12. So, Mr. Chin, please.
Thank you. Can all of you hear me? Okay, good. So as I think Joshua has introduced me, I'm a teacher at Geylang Methodist Secondary School. And as you know, schools are now in home-based learning. And we have been doing that, I think, for the past 3 weeks. And of course, it's a totally new experience for me and for all of us, and it is a struggle, because having to teach and having to conduct the lessons, having to conduct the assignments online is really a challenge, especially when the difficult part is when students do not appear online or they don't submit the work online. What can you do? I cannot make them stay back after school, and things like that. Yeah, so I think hopefully we are getting the hang of it, and well, they say that the holiday has been pushed forward, right, from June to May. Yeah, but of course the sentiment across the board is that it's not a real holiday. We can't go out, we can't travel, we still have to stay at home. But at least there's a break for us, and we make the most of it. And I think all the churches in Singapore, we are making the most of the safe distancing measures. I think I'm glad that Calvary are still continuing the service and having this fellowship and this preaching, to be done online. But of course, it is another challenge for me. It's the first time I have to preach, through Zoom online, and what's more is live stream, right? Yeah. And therefore this is the first time I'm wearing so formally at home. Okay. Yeah. But well, I guess we have to get used to it. And I do hope that I can still preach as per normal. And I think to be faithful to the word of God is the greatest responsibility. Okay. So today, the passage I've chosen is Numbers chapter 12. Allow me to just read, from the Bible. If you have your own Bible, you can turn to your own Bible app or the Bible to Numbers chapter 12. And I'm going to read from the ESV, okay, English Standard Version. Okay, so it says in chapter 12, verse 1, Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married. For he had married a Cushite woman. And they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? And the Lord heard it. Now, the man Moses was very meek, more than all people who were on the face of the earth. And suddenly, the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron and Miriam, come out, you three, to the tent of meeting. And the three of them came out. And the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tent and called Aaron and Miriam. And they both came forward. And he said, hear my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him, I speak mouth to mouth, clearly, and not in riddles, and he beholds the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. When the cloud removed from over the tent, behold, Miriam was leprous like snow. And Aaron turned toward Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said to Moses, O my Lord, do not punish us because we have done foolishly and have sinned. Let her not be as one day, whose flesh is half eaten away when he comes out of his mother's womb. And Moses cried to the Lord, O God, please heal her, please. And the Lord said to Moses, if her father had but spit in her face, should she not be shamed 7 days? Let her be shut outside the camp 7 days, and after that she may be brought in again. So Miriam was shut outside the camp 7 days, and the people did not set out on the march till Miriam was brought in again. After that, the people set out from Hazeroth and camped in the wilderness of Paran. Okay, so that is the passage for today. I'm not sure if all of you have read this passage before, but this happened, at the early parts when the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness, and they were about to cross the land of to the promised land. Okay, but this thing happened. Now, this was an incident that I think is very significant in the Bible, and it has a lot to do with both the leaders in churches today and, of course, the congregation. Now, when you read the first verse, okay, let's go to the next slide. It says, Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. Two questions came to our mind immediately. First, who were Miriam and Aaron? Okay. Now, this question is quite easy to answer, because there's a lot of evidence on these two characters. But then the next question is, who was this Cushite wife of Moses? Now, this is a question that is very hard to answer. In fact, until today, nobody really knows. Okay? If you ask different Bible scholars, they will have different interpretations. Okay? Why? Because that's all it says about this woman. And if there are a few hypotheses that let me just present to you. Okay, first, some believe it was Zipporah. Okay, how do we know it could be Zipporah? Okay, next, because in Exodus 2 verse 21, okay, already it is stated that Moses was married to this woman called Zipporah. Okay, after he fled Egypt, went to the wilderness, and after that he married this woman. So it's explicitly stated that Moses was married to Zipporah. Okay. Now, therefore, other people hypothesize, that this is not Zipporah, because Zipporah was known to be a Midianite. Here, this wife of Moses was described as a Cushite woman. So some people speculate that maybe Moses married a second wife on top of Zipporah. Or maybe Zipporah had died, or maybe he had divorced Zipporah, and therefore he had remarried, another woman, and it happened to be a Cushite woman. So this is there's a lot of confusion, and there's no way we can definitively identify who this Cushite wife of Moses is, because the Bible didn't give us more details than what's stated here. Personally, if you ask me, I prefer to believe that this woman, this wife, was still Zipporah. Okay, because nowhere in the Bible did it say that Moses remarried or married a second wife. Okay, so I would still presume that it was Zipporah. And but the question is, how come Miriam and Aaron would describe her as a Cushite woman? Now, the word Cushite is also translated as Ethiopian in the King James Version. Now, a Cushite woman likely was someone from Egypt. Okay? The idea of Ethiopian is linked to someone of the African race. So it could be that she either came from Egypt or came from Africa. Now, another interpretation is that this Cushite label was on this woman not because of her race, but because of the color of her skin. So if she was someone of dark skin, then they would use this term on her, which is more of a derogatory term. Okay, in short, it was a racist label. So if this woman was Zipporah, but because she was of a dark skin, and therefore Miriam and Aaron would label her as a Cushite woman. Okay, not because she was from an Egyptian or African race, but simply because of the color of the skin. So I think that, to me, is the most likely interpretation of this woman who is the wife of Moses. Now, is it really important who this woman was? Actually, it wasn't so important. Okay, but the whole idea that Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of his wife, likely is because they felt that she wasn't of a pure race as them. Okay, because if it was Zipporah, she was a Midianite, and a Midianite was a descendant of Abraham, but not of Jacob. Okay, whereas for Miriam, Aaron, and the rest of Israel who came out from Egypt, they were from the line of Jacob. So maybe they discriminated against this wife of Moses, okay, because she wasn't from the line of Jacob, and therefore maybe they taught her as a second-class citizen. Okay, so that is what I can make up of this wife of Moses as described in verse 1. Okay. Now, what about Miriam and Aaron? Who are Miriam and Aaron? We know Aaron, I mean, he's very prominently featured, since the days of Exodus, okay, because he was the spokesperson, beside Moses, when they went to present themselves to Pharaoh. Okay, and we know that Aaron was the older brother of Moses. Now, what about Miriam? Okay, now it's interesting in Micah chapter 6, verse 4. Okay, as written on the screen. God said, I brought you out of Egypt and redeemed you from the land of slavery. I sent Moses to lead you, also Aaron and Miriam. Now you realize that these three of them, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, they made up the highest authority over the Israelites at the time. So in Micah chapter 6, verse 4, Aaron and Miriam were mentioned together with Moses, okay, and they were the leaders together with Moses. But something else about Miriam, okay, she was also the sister of Moses, and therefore also the sister of Aaron. In fact, she was also mentioned in Exodus chapter 2. Let me read for you. Okay, at the time, do you remember that Moses' mother, she placed him in a basket and placed the basket in the river, okay, because his life was in danger because of the ruling of Pharaoh at the time. Now, this is what is written in Exodus chapter 2, verse 4 to 8. And his sister, that means Miriam, stood at a distance to know what would be done to him, okay, done to Moses. So she followed Moses, the basket, down the river. Verse 5. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her young woman walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the child was crying. She took pity on him and said, This is one of the Hebrews' children. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew woman to nurse the child for you. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. So the girl went and called the child's mother. Okay, so you see how Miriam played a very active role in this passage. That she followed the basket containing Moses down the river. And when she saw that the daughter of Pharaoh picked up the basket, now she went to her. Mind you, that was Pharaoh's daughter. Okay, and she suggested to Pharaoh's daughter to call a nurse from the Hebrew woman to nurse this child. Okay, that was her brother Moses. And of course, Pharaoh's daughter agreed to that. And Miriam went and called Moses' mother, their mother, to be the nanny of Moses. Now, in this episode, at the time, probably Miriam was only a few years, maybe 10, maybe 8 years old or 10 years old. We do not know. Okay, but probably she was still pretty young. But in her young age, she already exhibited some remarkable leadership qualities here. You know, she took the initiative to follow the basket. She had the courage to go up to Pharaoh's daughter, and she was so intelligent, even sly, you know, to suggest for one of the Hebrew women to nurse Moses. And in the end, she got their own mother to do that. So it was a very clever ploy by Miriam herself. And that was 80 years ago when Moses was born. Okay, so 80 years later, fast forward, we come to Numbers chapter 12. And this is the same Miriam that we encounter in this passage. Okay, so we know from young, Miriam had a lot of leadership qualities. And if you were to look at Exodus again, you realize that she was known as a prophetess, and she led the woman among the Israelites in song after the Lord led them across the Red Sea. Okay, so Miriam already was playing a prominent role among the women as a leader among them. Okay, so this is the Miriam that we know until Numbers chapter 12. Okay, okay, let's go on. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Now, this is what Miriam and Aaron said. Okay, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? And the Lord heard it. Now, you will notice the two questions that they posed. Now, of course, these are what we call rhetorical questions. Okay, the answers are obvious, or at least they intend to lead their listeners in a certain logical conclusion. Obviously, they want the hearers to conclude logically, well, that the Lord has spoken not only through Moses, but through them. And therefore, what are they implying? They are implying that they are equally qualified or even more qualified to lead the Israelites than Moses. And that's why they would mention that his wife was a Cushite. It gives the idea that because Moses married somebody who wasn't or as pure as them as a Jew or as a Hebrew, therefore Moses was less qualified than them to lead Israel. Now, so both the brother and sister, both of them that are the older brother and sister of Moses, were the ones who posed such a suggestion, okay, to the people of Israel. Now, can you imagine that your own biological older sister and older brother spoke against you? Yeah, and not only that, they were the deputies of Moses at this time. Okay, they were his assistants in leading the Israelites. If Moses heard what they said, how do you think he would have felt? How do you think we would have felt if we were in his shoes? Now, this reminds me of the lyrics of a song. I'm not sure if you know this song. It's those of you who are as well as me would know, 我最深爱的人，伤我却是最深. Okay, so it's translated as the ones whom we love the most are usually the ones who hurt us the most. Okay? And I think that is probably how Moses felt in this episode. Okay, when his own older sister and brother, discriminated against his wife, and also suggested that they are more qualified than him to lead the people. Okay, let's go on to the next slide in verse 3. Now, suddenly the author, of this passage, he seemed to digress and from the drama, and mention something. Now, the man Moses was very meek, more than all people who are on the face of the earth. Okay, so this is not part of the drama, right? But suddenly the author alluded, to the character of Moses. Okay? And this verse I felt was very inspiring. To me, it is the highest compliment that anyone could receive from God. To be known by God as someone who is very meek, more than anyone else on the face of the earth. Wow. Yeah, but I'm sure God will not give me such a compliment, because if he gave me such a compliment, I would go around bragging about it. Okay. Now, the problem with this compliment is that you cannot brag about it. Now, once you brag about it, you lose it, right? But this one statement about Moses reveals a few things. It reveals, firstly, the reaction of Moses to his sister and brother. So basically, this shows that he didn't react to what they said. Okay? That's why you notice there was silence. There was the silence of Moses at this point of time. It wasn't because he was timid, or he was a coward, or he didn't want to offend his sister and brother. But the Bible says that because he was very meek. And of course, in today's modern society, meekness is often confused with timidity or cowardice. But that isn't what meekness means. So what is meekness in the Bible? Let me read to you how some commentators explain meekness. Now, the word meek from the original language was used to describe reining in a stallion. That means a full-grown male horse. Okay? It is the idea of a horse being controlled and choosing to submit to authority. Okay, so imagine a full-grown male horse is very strong, very powerful, very fast, but the horse chose to be controlled and to submit to his or her trainer, his owner. Another explanation: meekness is a humble attitude that expresses itself in the patient endurance of offenses. Okay, I think, let me repeat that. Meekness is a humble attitude that expresses itself in the patient endurance of offenses. I like this definition a lot. This implies that the true test of meekness is when an offense is committed against us. For example, when we are criticized unfairly, maybe at work or even in church. Or maybe someone spread rumors about us. Or maybe you are not given the respect due to you. How do we react in these situations? If we are meek like Moses, we will not be offended. and therefore will not retaliate. That is meekness. And of course, we know that at this point of time, Moses had more reasons to be proud than anyone on the face of the earth, right? Moses was the one that God has chosen to lead the whole race of the Hebrew out from Egypt. He was the one who went to Pharaoh and called down the 10 plagues. He was the one who parted the Red Sea. He was the one that God would meet face to face. He was the one who received the law from Mount Sinai. He had every reason to be proud. So what is really amazing is that yet he was the most meek person in all the earth. Okay? And I think this is very important, especially for leaders in the church. Because the enemy of meekness is pride. And there is a very real tendency for leaders to become proud. Now, there are two groups of leaders that are susceptible to pride. And the first group would be successful leaders. Now, why would successful leaders be susceptible to pride? Okay, in the book by Oswald Sanders, Spiritual Leadership, he addressed the danger of pride extensively. Okay? And Oswald Sanders presents different manifestations of pride of successful leaders in this book. And he gave a list that I think is really useful for our reflection. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Okay, and I want to go a little bit slower because I think this list is very relevant even to today. Okay, the first manifestation of pride in leadership, egotism, where we think and speak of ourselves. When, for example, I did this and this for God. I won so many souls for God. I have been meeting the needs or caring for so and so, or I have impacted so many lives, or my church has grown to such a number. All this could be signs of egotism. The next is jealousy, when we compare ourselves to others. For example, why does God treat him better than me? Or why does God grant this person more spiritual gifts than me? The third one, popularity, a desire to be liked by people. For example, how many followers do I have? How many followers on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, or maybe in my cell group, or maybe in my church, in my ministry do I have? The next, infallibility, the belief that we cannot make mistakes. For example, everyone should listen to me because I know the best. Okay? I've drank more bubble tea than they have drank water. And the last one, indispensability, holding on to one's position when it should have passed to younger people. For example, we think God needs me, so I stay on. Okay? So I think this is a useful list for our reflection on whether pride has crept into us, okay? Especially for leaders who are successful. Okay? Now, let's go next slide. Now, there is a second group of leaders that are susceptible to pride. And these are unsuccessful leaders. Let me quote from Oswald Sanders in the book, from the book again. He says, every work of God includes days of frustration and days of joy. The leader is in peril of becoming overly depressed by the one and overly elated by the other. Okay? So Oswald Sanders presents to us, everyone who is serving God would experience both frustration and joy in different seasons. So the danger is that we become overly depressed by the days of frustration or become overly elated by the days of joy. And if you have been in leadership long enough, you know how true this is. There will be days where we witness breakthroughs in the lives of people we have been praying and caring for. And there will be times when a person that we have invested our energy and love fall short. And we are prone to become very discouraged and despair. Now, so that is also pride. Okay, so when we are unsuccessful or things don't go our way, we can either blame God and we ask, why do you not bless the work of my hands? Or sometimes we blame ourselves and we think it is my fault. I am unworthy. I am incompetent. Now, these kinds of reactions stem from pride. For pride makes us think that we determine the outcome of our labor, and we forget that actually God is the one who gives the increase. Let me share with you a personal experience. Well, several years ago, I was traveling home together with a younger brother. This younger brother, I've been discipling him for a number of years. And he revealed a shocking incident to me. Okay, he and his peers were having a meal together, and all of them were brothers, okay, whom I had invested my time and energy to disciple for a number of years. And during that meal, one of them started to talk about me, and he made an unsavory remark about me. Another person added to what he said by recounting an incident which revealed a flaw of mine. And everyone at the table took turns to do so, including this brother who shared with me the incident. Now, this brother told me that after the meal, he felt so guilty, he decided to confess and apologize to me for what he did. When I heard that, I experienced the cycle of grief. The first was denial. It's like, how could this take place? Then after that, it was anger. I felt it was really unfair to be treated in this way after all I had done for this group of brothers. Now, of course, in my anger and hurt, I thought of giving up. But when I brought my feelings before God in prayer, He showed me that this was actually His act of grace. He revealed this incident to me through this brother because He wanted to sanctify me. Now, what he did was definitely not permissible because it goes against biblical principles. But I came to the realization that it was not for me to judge them, because my responsibility was to forgive them and leave the judgment to God. Now, I realized that God, by His grace, made known this incident to me because He wanted me to learn from what they had said. I realized that what the brother said contained much truth about me. and I could derive useful lessons out from it. For example, what they said revealed that I was insensitive to their feelings. Hence, I learned I could do even better in the way I relate with them. So God brought me to a place where I had to choose whether to hold on to my anger and hurts, or to humble myself before Him and accept His work of sanctification in me. Now let's go on. Let's go back to the passage. Let's try the next slide. Okay, I shall skip this. Let's go on the next slide. Okay, let's go back to verse 2. Now you notice at the end of verse 2, it says, and the Lord heard it. Miriam and Aaron were not counting on this. They definitely did not intend for God to hear what they had said. They only mean it for the people of Israel and maybe Moses to hear it, but not God. Now, do you think that Miriam and Aaron would have said what they say if they knew that God would hear it? The truth is, many of the things that we say are not meant for God's ears. Now, if God were to hear every word that we speak, will it make a difference to our speech? And we know the reality is God definitely hears everything that we say. Now, when God heard what they had said, what did He do? Okay, let's look at the next slide. And suddenly, the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron and Miriam, come out, you three, to a tent of meeting. And the three of them came out. And the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tent and called Aaron and Miriam. And they both came forward. Now, firstly, what is this tent of meeting? Now, you have to go back to Exodus chapter 33, where it describes in detail this tent of meeting. Basically, it's a tent that Moses built outside the camp of Israel. And this tent was built for God to meet Moses. And it says in Exodus, whenever Moses go out to meet God, it will attract the attention of all Israel. Because a pillar of cloud would descend and remain at the entrance of the tent. Now, this time, that's why I think God said to Aaron and Miriam, come out, you three, to a tent of meeting. Means they have to go out of the camp of Israel to the tent of meeting. Okay. And the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud. And this shows that the Lord personally dealt with this matter. Now, usually, God would speak through Moses, right? Moses is like the mediator between God and the rest of Israel. Now, but of course, because Moses is the subject of the complaint in this incident, so obviously, God cannot use Moses to be the spokesperson. So what God did was He personally came to the defense of Moses, and He spoke to Miriam and Aaron directly. I suspect this was the first time, and maybe the last time, that God spoke directly to Aaron and Miriam. Now, this shows us another lesson. Because Moses was very meek, he didn't defend himself. God chose to defend on his behalf. Therefore, if we are the subject of a complaint, we can either choose to defend ourselves, or we can choose to let God be the one. Now, why would God come to the defense of Moses? Let's look at the next slide. Now, the Lord says, not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him, I speak mouth to mouth, clearly, and not in riddles. And he beholds the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? You notice how God described Moses here. He is faithful in all my house. Now, this idea that Moses was faithful in the house of God, gives the image that Moses acted like a steward over God's people. Okay, and Moses proved to be completely trustworthy. So that's why God gave him such a compliment. Now, let's click next. It's interesting that Hebrews chapter 3, verse 1 to 2 says this. Therefore, holy brothers and sisters who share in the heavenly calling, fix your thoughts on Jesus, whom we acknowledge as our apostle and high priest. Verse 2, he was faithful to the one who appointed him, just as Moses was faithful in all God's house. Now you notice that as the Hebrew writer was describing Jesus as faithful, he described the faithfulness of Jesus to that of Moses. So that was how much Moses was faithful to God. Just as Jesus completely submitted and fulfilled the will of the Father, Moses did likewise when he was leading the people of Israel. And if you read Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, you will observe that the faithfulness of Moses was truly complete because he was leading this group of stiff-necked, rebellious, and whining people. And he shepherded them faithfully for 40 years in the wilderness before he was called home to be with the Lord. Okay? And I think it's for this, that's why God so highly favored Moses for his meekness and his faithfulness. Okay? And we know that God already reminded Miriam and Aaron that he speak to Moses mouth to mouth, or other version is face to face. And Moses could see the form of the Lord. And the whole of Israel already knew this fact because of the tents of meeting. And therefore, Miriam and Aaron could not claim to be ignorant of such an obvious evidence that Moses was chosen by God. Now, after declaring the offense that Miriam and Aaron had committed, God judged the two of them. Let's go on to the next slide. It says, when the cloud removed from over the tents, behold, Miriam was leprous like snow. And Aaron turned toward Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. Okay? And Aaron said to Moses, "O my Lord, do not punish us, because we have done foolishly and have sinned. Let her not be as one dead, whose flesh is half eaten away when he comes out of his mother's womb." Now, there are two questions that would arise, from these verses. Firstly, why was Aaron spared from the sentence? Why was it only Miriam who became leprous? Why not Aaron too? Now, there's a clues in the passage that suggests that Miriam was the main instigator. Okay, because in verse 1, the chapter started with Miriam and Aaron. Okay? In the Bible, usually it's the man who is named before woman. But in this case, Miriam was named before Aaron. We can infer from this order that Miriam was the main instigator, that she was more culpable than Aaron in speaking against Moses. Okay? And secondly, why did God judge Miriam in this way? Why did God inflict leprosy, or basically is any form of skin disease, on Miriam such that she became like snow? Yeah. Now, do you notice that this is what we can call poetic justice? Remember how Miriam and Aaron insulted Moses' wife because likely of her dark skin. Okay? And so God made Miriam's skin become white as snow, as if to say, since you despise those who are dark skinned, let's see how you like it white. Okay? So there's a sharp irony in God's judgment. Now, that's why we should reflect. Do we have a habit of calling people names? Okay. Well, if we do, then let's remember Miriam. Okay, so when Aaron saw this horrific sight, he pleaded with Moses for forgiveness. Now, I would say that Aaron wasn't spared also. The fact that Aaron had to plead with Moses, it means he had to humble himself towards the one that he criticized earlier. Okay? So that itself, I think, is a judgment on Aaron. And when Aaron pleaded with Moses, how did Moses reply? Let's look at the next verse. Click. Okay, so Moses simply said to God, "Oh God, please heal her, please." Other version says he beseeched the Lord. So this, you notice, is the very first time that Moses speak in this chapter. So Moses didn't speak when he was criticized, but he spoke up when Aaron begged him to intercede for Miriam. And when Moses spoke, he begged the Lord to heal Miriam. So we can see once again the meekness of Moses, that he would choose to intercede on behalf of the one who hurt him. Okay. Now, this reminds us of what Jesus taught in Luke chapter 6. Love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. Okay, click next. So that's the verse. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. Now, we know that this is often very hard to do, especially when you feel a lot of hurt, a lot of anger and disappointment towards the one who committed an offense against you. But I think we see here in the example of Moses how he was able to do that to his very own sister who had criticized him. And I think this is an inspiring example to all of us who are leaders. Okay, whether it's leaders in the church or maybe leaders in our workplace where God has placed us. Can this be said of us? Are we as meek as Moses? Are we also as faithful as Moses towards all the sheep that God has entrusted to us? Or do we become selfish, negligent, or maybe we entertain thoughts of quitting when the going gets tough? I think from the example of Moses here, it shows us that God reserves a special place for his servants who are counted good and faithful. So let us not lose heart, because we want to hear those words when he returns. Now, for all of us who are members of a local church, we are by default under the spiritual authority in the church, right? Okay, so for you will be Calvary Chapel. Now, whether you like it or not, God has placed leaders over us. Now, besides the elders and the deacons, You could be under the leadership of your maybe cell group leaders or other ministry leaders. This passage does not mean that we should submit to the leadership in our church blindly and without questioning them. I think that's not the intention of this passage. Okay? It does not mean that we should not give feedback or express our disagreement to the leaders out of fear of being judged by God. Now, but what this passage should impress upon us is to be discerning of our leaders. Okay, let's go into the next slide. Okay, next. Okay, let's skip this, go on to the next one. Now I want to look at first test with you. Sorry, not first T, first test. This is 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. And this is quoted from the King James Version, which I think is probably the most accurate. And we beseech you, brethren, to know them which labor among you, and are over you in the Lord, and admonish you, and to esteem them very highly in love for their works' sake, and be at peace among yourselves. So the question is, how should we treat and relate to the leaders that God has placed over us? Now, I think 1 Thessalonians is very instructive. Now, the word here is, firstly, we need to know. Now, this word know is translated from the Greek word oida. And I think there's no English word that can completely express the meaning in the original language. Okay, oida here is translated to know. Okay, other versions of Bible translate it as acknowledge or appreciate. Now, the word to know means that we need to be fully aware who are these people. Okay? And the people that we are to be fully aware of are those who labor among us, who are over us, the Lord, and who admonish us. Notice that here Paul, he didn't write the title of the leaders like elders or pastor, because there could be others who they may not hold some official title, but they are laboring among you. They are over you in the Lord, and they also admonish you. So if they fit these descriptions, we are to know them. That means we are to recognize them and to acknowledge them. Now, notice that the Bible didn't say to know those who are perfect, because there are no perfect leaders. All leaders definitely have their flaws. Okay? But for leaders, we need to be working hard among those that God has placed under us. That's why we labor among them. And we are to be over them. We are to shepherd them. We are to care for them. And we are even to admonish them. These, I think, are the three job descriptions of God's leaders among in the church. Okay? Now, so after knowing them, after we are aware who they are, what do we do? Verse 13 says we are to esteem them very highly in love for their works' sake. Now, to esteem them very highly in love means we submit to them, means we give them the due respect. It means we follow their leading wholeheartedly, not out of fear, but out of love. Okay? Yes, we can disagree. Even if we disagree with them, we do so with all respect. Okay? And we are able to submit to them willingly and not grudgingly. So I hope that this will be our response to the leaders who imitate the example of Moses among us. Okay, let's go back to the previous slide. Okay, I just want to summarize, that there are two distinguishing marks of Moses that we have observed from today's passage: his meekness and his faithfulness. So I think for all of us who are leaders or who aspire to be leaders, okay, we should really, really grow in our meekness and faithfulness. And we know that God looks favorably on such servants of His. Okay, and I do hope that it will be for all of us who aim to be like Moses, okay, because we want to hear the compliments, how good and faithful servant when he returns. Okay. So this is about Moses. Next. Okay. Finally, I just have two questions for your consideration. Firstly, to all the leaders, do we struggle with either meekness or faithfulness in our ministry? If we do struggle with either one of them, then let us seek for prayer. Okay, we can even seek for prayer from those that God has placed under us. And secondly, I think to everyone, are we aware of the leaders approved by God in the church? And think of what does it mean to esteem them very highly in love. Okay, as what is written in 1 Thess chapter 5, verse 13. Okay, so I will leave this with you for your reflection for today. Okay. Let's go to God in prayer as we end the sermon. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you this day for really the shining example of Moses, that he was even mentioned in Hebrews as one who is faithful in all of your house, just as Jesus did. And we know that Moses wasn't a perfect man, but he was meek and he was faithful. And therefore we pray for all of us that we will also strive to grow in our humility and to grow in our faithfulness. Whether we are leaders at this point or not, I pray that all of us will aim to grow in these two very commendable character of yours. Yeah. And we pray and ask that we will also learn to really be aware of the people that you have placed above us, who are shepherding us, who are caring for us, who are laboring among us. And let us therefore esteem them really highly in love, because only then shall we be able to be united as a church and be able to serve with one purpose and with one heart. We thank you for this in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.